Many years ago, around the time of the famine, the callers got together and crossed the ocean to establish themselves as a force in America. They looked from Hell's Kitchen to a better place to stay, and they found at the end of the rainbow what they thought was the promised land. A place they could raise their family in peace and quiet. Here is the old homestead. This is where Garry played football and slapball daily with his buddies. But mostly, he lived in the entire neighborhood. He'd often stop by his friend Dan's house, and they'd head down, crossing Greenpoint Avenue, arriving in 199 Schoolyard to play football, basketball, but mostly stickball. Here is the stickball court, the box. Garry would get up. Sometimes he'd be Roger, sometimes Yogi, sometimes Mickey. And he'd try to hit the ball over Seal's roof. And he always complained that the right-handed hitter would have to hit the Empire State Building for a home run. So he turned to basketball, where he developed a deadly jumper. Often he practiced here while waiting to get into the big game on the main court. Let's take a walk up the avenue, past Phyllis's Bake Shop, the local pub, Nettie's and Wetter's, still the original sign, perhaps the original store. Up Greenpoint Avenue past Philistein's, looking back to see the Empire State Building. Here, this used to be King's Grocery, now it's the Thalia Spanish Theater, a landmark. Here is the 43rd Street Park, which we barely attended. The basketball court had a gravel base in our day, now it's a good court. This is where Dan's father was arrested for gambling. Now it's a children's playground. It was the scandal of the neighborhood when they spent the night in jail. Nelson's hardware store, now abandoned. At one time it was a movie theater. Before our day, my cousin Jerry Waters remembers that. Down 48th Avenue, where we go to Whelan's liquor store. Garry was the delivery boy there for a while. And Dan learned to dance across the street at what used to be the Clark Sisters. And of course, the center of the neighborhood, St. Teresa's Church. Here's the rectory where Father Morrow sat and composed his sermons, and planned the future of the parish, and made up the rules for the nuns. It's where Sister Anne Louise gave piano lessons to many of the students. And of course, the old school itself. There's the entrance that we were in, we generally entered in. Next to it, the schoolyard, in our day, totally empty. Now there's a hoop court there. Here's the other schoolyard between the church and the school. That's our class. Dan got to be right in the middle. Two of our buddies, Russell and Sal. Often we'd go off to the scouting activities together, meeting at the church. There's the back of Garry's head as Dan is walking down at choir practice. Off in the back, that's also Garry, the sun shining out in his face. And this is the street we would cross to escape having to stand still for the Angelus. If you got to Celtic Avenue, you were free of the power of the nuns. And when you got to 43rd Street, you were back in Sunnyside. Here is Sal Beglieri's house. Up the block, there is his grandparents' residence. And of course, this is where Russell lived, the Theodore. And then Joe Scanlon's house. And our buddy Mickey. I don't know who Michael Brennan is, but the street's been named after him. There we are, back at the old homestead again. sneaking down for a barbecue. This is what's left of Queens Vocational's schoolyard. The handball court could be the original, don't really know. And this used to be the bowling alley, Licity Lanes. And that at one time was the original sandy field where we actually played baseball and football. Sometimes we'd go to Astoria where we would see the Hellgate Bridge. This is a spot where our fathers at one time actually swam, probably during the 1930s. We swam in Astoria Pool, 10 cents a pop. We even swam in the big pool, now emptied, probably for insurance purposes. This is where we played football in Astoria with Sal Scaltro, Bobby Nicholson, Mickey Finelli, John McKenna, Brute Gallagher, Dennis Brogan. Later on we played tennis with the Feraldos here and Johnny Fenton. Occasionally, as we grew up, we went on a date. One night, our first date to Long Beach. One evening as we took some girls from Whitestone, and often we'd go to the World's Fair, visiting the Eunice Fair, and even the New York State Pavilion. And of course the Mighty Sirens, playing at Queensbridge Park. The park is still there, the bench seems to be gone. That's the original Siren Field, and that could be the original bench. And of course Big Alice, where Gary's Uncle Jack took us on a wonderful tour. There's our buddy Mickey, who took us on many tours around Brooklyn, and of course our boys, the Toes in the Grass, Brian, Mark, John, Owen, and of course the Four Tops appearing at my wedding, and Garry toasting me, my best man. And then we took a plane, flying over the sea and arriving in Dublin, visiting many people, and going back to the Hegarty, to the Gillespie home place in Rappa. This is where we drank poutine, of all things, up the road with Willie Hegarty. That's what's left of the castle. We mucked around in there, avoiding all of the cow dung. Meeting Kevin, the Donald Trump of Ireland, Kevin McTrump, and there is a Plunkett. That's Gary's great-great-great-great-grandfather's head. And Garry has a laugh as today he leads tours himself as Professor McAuliffe, Dr. McAuliffe, and his crew in Italy, visiting the Colosseum. Meanwhile, we have passed the mantle on to the two youngsters, Dan and Garry, both of our firstborns. Dan following up in a musical career out on the left coast. Okay, Garry, keep on trucking. Let's try to make another 60.